We will call the meeting to order, and if we could all please rise, the Honorable Robert Donovic in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Donovic. We appreciate that. And at this time, I will ask our clerk, Susan Nash, to please take the roll.
Councilmember Donovic,
Here, gone on military duty.
Councilmember Jolly,
Present, Livonia, Michigan.
Councilmember Toy,
Here, Livonia, Michigan.
Vice President Barr,
Here in Livonia, Michigan.
Councilmember White,
Present, Lehigh Acres, Florida.
Councilmember McCullough,
Present, Livonia, Michigan.
President McIntyre.
Present, Livonia, Michigan, Livonia City Hall. Thank you very much, Clerk Nash. Good evening and welcome to the 1,920th regular meeting of the City Council. Tonight's voting is a voting meeting. Minutes of this meeting will be approved at the next regular council meeting, which is scheduled to be held on Monday, May 24th, 2021, 2 weeks from today. At this time, I would like to ask the council about the minutes. We have the presentation of the minutes for the 1,919th regular meeting of the City Council that was held on April 26, 2021.
So move.
Move from Councilmember Toy and support from Councilmember Nash. Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes?
No. That's, you said Councilmember Nash. I think you meant somebody else.
White, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Those PTSD flashbacks. I'm not making light of PTSD, by the way, at all. Councilmember Donovic, I hope you took no offense at that. Never make light of the issues that our veterans have or anybody else with those issues. Anyway, if there are no corrections to the minutes and no one from the audience has any corrections to the minutes, we could go ahead, please, Clerk Nash, and take the vote.
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Present.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
Vice President Barr,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
Aye, and the minutes are approved with 6 votes of the other council members that were present at the last meeting. At this time, I go to the council for personal announcements, tributes, or recognitions. One moment, Councilmember Toy. Councilmember Jolly, do you have retirees for us this evening?
I do. I would like to wish Paul Kalea happy retirement. I'm not sure what his exact rank is retiring here. I think he's at least, I believe he's a sergeant. But Paul Kalea has served in the Livonia Police Department for 25 years. Very good guy. We wish him the best on his retirement and wish him a happy and healthy life going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Toy.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I have some sad news. Those of us that are a little bit older may remember Esther Friedrichs, who lived on Southampton, just down from Joe McCotter. Esther passed away, I believe it was last week, and she was going to hit her 100th birthday in a few weeks shy of that. And the family is a Bentley High School family and very active. Her husband was, in fact, principal Bentley High School in the early days, as well as superintendent of schools. And Esther had so many accolades to her that one of the biggies was she taught swimming and aerobics, and she was very, very fit person and just wonderful, very kind of liberal in some of her causes, but just a caring heart and well-meaning, and she's going to be missed. And it just shows you that age goes on and on. She was very healthy and very wise right up till the end of the years. And she's related, believe it or not. She married the grandson of the gentleman I went to Bentley with. And he married Jocelyn Benson, our Secretary of State. So it's kind of a small world when you look at, the wider view of things. But Livonia has always been well represented up in Lansing when I was there. And that just shows you how far of a reach Livonia really has. And God bless Esther. And if I may request a few moments of silence for Esther Friedrichs. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Toy. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to offer?
Madam President,
Yes, Councilmember Barr.
excuse me. So as you know, May is a big month in our family. I don't remember if I said this last week when you guys wished, or 2 weeks ago when you wished me happy birthday, but I have a daughter that had a birthday the day after mine and want to publicly wish Kelsey a happy birthday. And then my wife has a birthday later this week. So happy birthday to my beautiful wife as well.
Happy birthday, Barr family. Anyone else? All right, I have several announcements. First, it's my pleasure to offer a very happy birthday to Deputy Fire Chief John Unsworth, who'll be celebrating his birthday this week. And on May 21st, Mike Slater, our Finance Director, will be celebrating a birthday. And we wish both of them very happy birthdays and all the best in the coming year. I should also wish our youngest son, Patrick Culleton, and all his classmates, Detroit Catholic Central High School class of 2021. Congratulations on their graduation, which will be taking place on Saturday, May 22nd. So congratulations, Shamrocks. And then I know we in Livonia are looking forward to a number of high school graduations in the weeks immediately following that week. So anyway, I wanted to comment on emails and phone calls that I receive with some frequency, and they kind of ebb and flow. And that's regarding mask wearing. And I generally hear from people who are not happy about the state's mask requirements and admonish Livonia for either request that we do not make masks mandatory in Livonia, or suggest that the city council, the city government should push back on the state regulations regarding masks. Regarding masks mandatory in Livonia, I know of no plans, have heard no plans from anyone, no interest on anyone's behalf in the city government or the administration on making masks mandatory. And regarding the city's ability to push back on mask requirements, we do not have the ability to do so. Just with other issues, notably alcohol, firearm, cities, municipalities, local governments do not have the ability to set the law. The state takes precedent, and if we were to attempt to challenge that precedent, change the state law, the city would find itself very quickly in a lawsuit, and would be almost guaranteed that we would lose the lawsuit. So doesn't mean you can't contact us, but I did want to address those two issues. And then finally, on the issue of policing and police officers, we all hear a lot about the things that police officers do that are not good, and we all could cite numerous instances in the last several years where police officers have acted inappropriately and illegally, and most recently there was a conviction in the case in Minneapolis. We also hear a lot of complaints about police and suggestions that police should be defunded, and that law enforcement really has no part in the operation of a civil society. And this past Saturday, there was a shooting in Times Square, New York, which is, of course, very unfortunate. Things happen, shootings happen anywhere where in every metropolitan area. But one of the victims, the innocent victims, was a 4-year-old girl who was hit in the leg, and the injury itself was not life-threatening, but she was in danger of bleeding to death very quickly. And were it not for the actions of a New York City policewoman who was in the vicinity, who came to the little girl's aid and applied a tourniquet, she would have lost her life. So again, we all expect police officers and have every, we expect and we demand that police officers act legally and appropriately and that they are trained to do so. But we also, I think it's important to recognize and celebrate when law enforcement officers do something that saves a life, and all lives are valuable. But there's something especially about a 4-year-old child who's on vacation with her family. So anyway, thank you for that. Councilmember Barr.
Yeah, Madam President, thanks for sharing those comments. And it just brought something to mind that I hadn't necessarily planned on speaking to tonight, but I'll just key off what you just said and tack it on. I don't know who got the chance to listen to James Craig's announcement of his resignation as police chief of Detroit today, but I did get a chance to watch that. And first of all, as a member of the Southeast Michigan community, I think it's worthwhile to acknowledge the job that he has done there over the last 8 years. We have all benefited from it. In my opinion, he's led with distinction and with integrity and just done some incredible things. But I just pulled up here a section of his comments that I think he just spoke with conviction, and it really grabbed me today. And this is a quote. He said, "We don't talk enough about our support of police officers. Our profession nationally is in crisis." He said, "Cops count, leadership matters. The vast majority do it right." He said, "Let's face it, the aggression against our police officers today is unlike anything I've ever witnessed. We've got to support the men and women who are out there on the front lines. And when you look at what's happening in our other cities where police officers are leaving in large numbers, they're leaving for one reason. They don't feel supported. These police officers deserve better than that." And I was moved by the conviction with which he spoke that, but I was also just thankful. And I think it's worth acknowledging that we live in a city that really, I think, does stand in support with its police officers. I think that's been clear over the last 12 months. Just from what I hear from the community, actions that we've seen. I know our mayor recently spoke to it at her State of the City address. And I'm thankful to live in a community where we recognize what those people do every day. And Madam President, just going off your comments, it seemed a good opportunity to recognize the service of Chief Craig and to share those comments and just reflect on what we can be thankful for here in Livonia. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Barr. And if you don't have anything else, then I'm going to move on to official announcements for this evening. The first is that we have new data on items 7, 8, and 11, and that we have a public hearing on via Zoom on June 2nd. And the next announcement that I would like to make is regarding meetings, and that is beginning with the June 14th regular meeting of the City Council at 7 p.m. We will be moving back to in-person meetings. We are as I think most people know, the governor set a threshold of 55% for returning to the workplace 2 weeks after. And I think officially the state moves back to that on May 24th. I consider the City Council meetings to be a workplace and see no reason for us not to resume our in-person work. And we will, of course, be adhering to all orders and the law and MDDHS or MDHHS's requirements about social distancing and capacity of the auditorium and all other COVID protocols. But I'm very happy to make that announcement. It's been a long time coming. I recognize that there are probably people who feel both ways, but it's very important that as the legislative body in this city, that we move back to doing our work in person, I think. And I think there's been a lot of great work done by everyone, our elected officials, our support staff, certainly IT, every other department head in supporting Zoom meeting formats, but it's going to be awfully nice to be back in person and be able to see the people from the audience and our citizens and residents who want to come see us to be able to see them in person. So that's it. With that, we move on to introduction of the department heads. And I'll begin with the people who show up on this screen in the order that I see them. Sarah Kasparich, our manager of the City Council office and the City Council business. Paul Bernier, our city attorney. LaShawn Thomas, our director of governmental affairs. Our city engineer, Mr. Todd Munsick, our city clerk, the Honorable Susan Nash, our Director of Economic Development and Planning, Mark Termina, our Director of Information Services, Casey O'Neill, and then moving on to my other list. Let's see, Doug Moore, our Department of Public Works Superintendent. And one of these days, Doug, I'm going to make sure that I get your title correct. We are privileged to have our former mayor, the Honorable Jack Engelbretson, joining us this evening. And let me see, I don't want to miss anyone. Parks and Recreation, I believe that's Mr. Ted Davis, our Director of Parks and Recreation, and Community Affairs, and I think that's it. And my apologies if I'm missing any of our other outstanding department heads. So thank you, department heads, for being with us this evening. And at this time, we go to our first session at the beginning of the meeting of audience communication. And as always, I will ask the Honorable Kathy White, our council parliamentarian, if she would please read the rules for audience communication.
Thank you, Madam President. The rules are as follows. Members of the public audience at the meeting shall not speak until they are recognized by the chair. Each person recognized by the chair to address the council shall identify himself or herself by name and, if appropriate, group affiliation. A person addressing council on an item on the agenda shall be limited to 2 minutes unless the period of time is extended by a majority of the council present, and shall be recognized to speak prior to council's consideration of the item. There will be an audience communication section of not more than 30 minutes duration at the beginning of all council regular and study meetings where citizens may address the council. There will also be an audience communication section at the end of all regular and study council meetings where citizens may address the council on any matter that is not on the agenda of that meeting. Citizens who wish to expand upon their remarks will be asked to reduce the matter to writing and submit it to the city clerk, and such item may be placed on a future council study session for further consideration. A person addressing council under the audience communications portion of the agenda will be limited to a total of 3 minutes at each study or regular meeting unless the period of time is extended by a majority of the council present. A citizen may address the council once during audience communication. If the citizen has addressed the council during the first audience communication period at the beginning of the meeting, the citizen will not be permitted to address the council again during any audience communication period at the end of the meeting. Anyone addressing the council shall make responsible comments. Personal, impertinent, slanderous, or profane remarks are not permitted. Anyone causing a breach of the peace may be removed from the council meeting. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Councilmember White. And with that, I will go first to Brent Sabo. And Mr. Sabo, you should be able to unmute yourself. And we would ask that you yourself give us your name and your address, please.
Hi, my name is Brent Sabo, and I live at 14587 Blue Sky Street in the Castle Gardens subdivision. As you are aware, the Department of Public Works is planning to remove 24 healthy, mature right-of-way trees from Blue Sky Street beginning in 1 week as part of a road repair project to improve stormwater drainage. The city engineer has shared the project details with me, and I fully understand that the road repairs as planned may cause damage to the root systems of certain trees. I respectfully request that the city engineer reevaluate and amend the road repair plans to both carry out necessary road improvements and protect existing mature trees in the neighborhood, a goal which I believe is not only attainable, but necessary. It is unacceptable to continue removing healthy, mature trees from this city without making sufficient efforts to preserve them when possible. These are not mutually exclusive outcomes. As a licensed professional engineer, the city engineer should be held to the highest standards for ethics and quality assurance. In fact, one of the obligations from the Professional Engineer Code of Ethics is that a professional engineer shall at all times strive to serve the public interest. It is an engineer's duty to find creative solutions to solve problems, not to choose the most convenient solution. There is most certainly more than one way to repair a road for positive stormwater drainage. There are subdivisions within the city with roads constructed in a different manner, which both facilitates drainage and preserves existing trees, such as Old Rosedale Gardens. I do not accept that similar solutions are not possible on Blue Skies. The Castle Gardens subdivision is bordered on two sides by major interstates, making the case for tree preservation all the more critical. Trees not only improve the air quality for those of us living in the subdivision, they help to reduce the traffic noise. Trees also cool the air on the hottest of days and absorb stormwater runoff. Healthy, mature trees should not be removed, especially en masse. The certified arborist on staff with the city can tell you that these trees they are removing are in fact healthy, and they're removing them only in speculation of damage resulting from the way in which they're repairing the roads. It is my understanding that the City Council has faced significant opposition to tree removals throughout the city over the years. Yet, the same process has continued unabated. It is time that you, as our elected officials, listen to our concerns and change your tactics. Other streets and other subdivisions have already been devastated by these massive tree removals for decades to come. You still have the chance to do the right thing on Blue Sky Street. I will end with a question for Council President McIntyre. Will you commit to revising the road construction plan in an effort to preserve the trees? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Sabo. First of all, it's not within city councils. And first of all, let me thank you for your time. I know you've put a lot of time and research into this effort. I know it's important to you. I know that you are working on behalf of your neighbors and your neighborhood. It is not within city council's purview nor decision-making authority to change our tree replacement plans. That is the responsibility of the administration. I do want to address one thing that you said, Mr. Sabo, and again, I very much appreciate your comments and the concern and the nature of the concerns in citing the professional code of ethics or the code of ethics for professional engineers. I don't know anyone who works harder, and I know a lot of engineers. I don't know any who work harder than our city engineer, Todd Zielinski, in upholding all of the obligations that fall to a professional engineer. Mr. Zielinski is not acting alone in making decisions. Mr. Zielinski acts as part of a team of department heads and other professionals. And while there's always room for discussion, and again, I very much appreciate the work you're doing and the conversations you've had with your neighbors, I do want to suggest that in the many years I've known Mr. Zielinski and worked closely with Mr. Zielinski on many issues, and Mr. Zielinski and I don't always agree on everything. He does do, without question, an outstanding job of upholding all of the responsibilities and obligations of a professional engineer. So thank you, Mr. Sabo. Mr. Donovic, Councilmember Donovic, before I go to the next person who I think wishes to speak on this, did you want to speak or speak after Mr. Crowley?
I could speak after the next resident comment.
Okay, I'll go to you after the next resident. Good evening, Mr. Crowley. You should be able to unmute yourself so that we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I think Brett summed up most, but I did want to mention, I know that I spoke to, engineering and also Dave in I don't have his last name in front of me, Dave in front of, with the mayor's office, but we were talking about the removal of the trees. And so I just drove a few blocks, and I spoke to you earlier today, just on a few blocks in Castle Gardens, sort of the from Hicks to 5 Mile Newburgh area. So between Hicks and Newburgh, and then from approximately Ross to 5 Mile, there's over 100 trees missed on Boulevard that were removed.
Mr. Crowley, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you, so I don't know if you're able to move closer.
Is this better?
That is better.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yes. Anyway, I drove through the neighborhood and I wrote down each address with missing trees. There was over 100 properties with trees missing on the boulevard. So I have each address, and just in those few blocks, those trees were never replaced. There's no divot, There is no, dead tree. It's just the vacancy of a tree being removed and being sodded over. So, they're not being replaced. I'm not sure if it's an option, but, part of being, I think, a tree city is that we should have trees on each boulevard. I don't think it should necessarily be an option for that particular homeowner that is, it is a community property, just like the sidewalk. And I think it should be up to the residents as a whole to decide whether trees are being replaced or not. But as Brett said, we're removing trees that don't even need to be removed. And I think there's other options. And what I'd like to do too is, I don't know if there's anyone else on the call, but we'd like to kind of take a roll call of those that are actually opposed that are here, if that's possible. If not, we do have a petition with over 200 names so far, just since last Wednesday that are in opposition. So we've submitted that unofficially, and we'll get that submitted this week officially, and then we'll continue to add from there.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. I believe Councilmember White, how much time, Mr. Crowley, have left?
Has 19 seconds.
Okay.
Right.
We were going to.
Mr. Crowley, time will not permit the roll call of everyone who's on the call, but what I would suggest that would be valuable information to us. If you would share, that's okay. We all have dogs. Understand. If you would share that petition with the city council office.
Yes, we will do that.
All right. Councilmember Toy, I'll go to you after Mr. Crowley, in your last few seconds. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, again, we just, again, would like your commitment to really look into this. We're not saying that that some trees don't need to be removed. We just want to change the way that it's being approached and to really minimize the removal of any healthy tree.
Thank you. Okay. Understood. And thank you very much. And again, as I said to Sabo, very much appreciate your time and your research and, coming forward to speak for yourself, for your neighbors and your neighborhood. So thank you. I'm going to go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Councilmember Donovic and then Councilmember Toy, if you still have something, and then Vice President Barr. Councilmember Donovic.
Thank you, Madam President. Like myself, and I'm assuming everyone else on council, we've all received a lot of emails about this and personal messages from residents through many different avenues. So if it would be okay, I would like to offer a resolution to put this issue of road repair, tree removal into the committee of the whole, if that would be okay. Thank you. I'd like to...
just one moment. Was that support from President Barr? Vice President Barr has offered support for that.
Thank you, Madam President. I would just like to learn more about this. This isn't any knock on anyone, particular person or department. I would just like to learn more about this, and maybe we can have a little bit more dialogue on this and see if there's any thing we can do in the future. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Before I go to Councilmember Toyers and Councilmember Donovic, we need to act on this resolution. Are there any comments on the resolution that Councilman Donovic has offered, supported by Vice President Barr?
I've got a comment on it, Madam President, but I don't know if Laura had.
Councilmember Toy, do you want to comment on this or something else?
It probably involves that because it's information. I talked to a couple of residents today. I think some of the frustration was they were getting mixed messages. And so they came before the council and, and I'm not sure what that means, Madam Chair or other colleagues, but I think the direction Donovic's taken us in, Councilman Donovic, is the right one, and Councilman Barr. We need to understand this better. The horse died and he never did that before, and we don't want to get into that kind of mindset. And Mr. Zielinski and his others, David, they're a great team in there, and I know that they're very professional and they can come up with some great solutions. And even some of the residents in those areas our engineer types, et cetera. And I think just all working together and talking it out. And since we're going to be starting to meet in person, Madam Chair, this might give us a great opportunity to think of something new that can solve this and how the communication is going. I know that Sarah works very hard in our office to look at constituent kinds of things that come in the office. I've sent her quite a few today. And, you know, it just behooves us to look at things a little different because it's different times and different attitudes on people. And trees are very important to all of us for a lot of good reasons that Mr. What is it, Salo or?
Sabo, Mr. Sabo, Mr. Crowell.
I'm sorry. I'm not good with last names unless it's Smith, Jones, or Toy. So anyhow, Madam Chair, I thank you for your indulgence, but I really believe that I think we can resolve this to go perhaps in some other directions on this, because this has come up before with this tree kind of issue. And Mr. Zelensky has taken all kinds of time to go out there and his team. So, you know, they're a fine bunch of people. It's not that the city's trying to be mean or, you know, ruthless in any way, but I also give credit to the residents that hopped on their concern and got involved, because that's so important for citizen involvement as well. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Vice President Barr, and then I'll go to Councilmember McCullough.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I have a question before a comment, question through the chair to Todd Zelensky. Todd, for this particular neighborhood, how quickly, and what's the time frame in which these trees are slated to come down?
Again, we signed a contract with Great Lakes Solutions LLC, so obviously majority of the trees on Blue Skies are scheduled to be removed as part of the overall program. Letters were sent out to residents on April 21st for the tree removals to give them advance notice. Again, that's why we do the due diligence to address any concerns they have. The contractor was looking to start next week to do the tree removals. Again, I can't predict the weather, but I would say, you know, that they were starting next week. So I would hope we get a committee of the whole meeting as soon as possible and get this ironed out so we can move in a direction after the facts have been sorted through, and let the contractor know so that way he can plan accordingly.
I would share that hope, and coming out of this meeting, I'm sure she will, but I'd ask that President McIntyre could try to get this topic up quickly. You know, if this notices were sent out April 21st, the residents are not slow in coming to us on this date. I mean, this is really for them to get organized and talk to each other. This is really their first opportunity, and for all intents and purposes. So I don't think we've wasted any time here, but I'd like to have that held off until we could have this discussion. And then to that discussion, first, just briefly, I would just want to reiterate too, you know, the gentleman mentioned, you know, ethics and quality and serving the public interest and related to our city engineer. I'll just say again, you know, Todd exemplifies all those characteristics. Nobody's trying to do the wrong thing here. That being said, this is one thing, and Todd knows this is one thing that he and I have discussed over the years and had some disagreement on. And I share the residents' concern about this. I think that our mature tree-lined streets are one of the distinctive features, really one of the assets for a older inner ring suburb like ourselves versus the Cantons and the South Lyons and the Novis that just don't have that established look. And I think it was Mr. Sabo, either him or Mr. Crowley, that I wrote it down here. The term only in speculation. I don't know if I'm quoting him exactly right, but he said something about it seems like these trees are being taken down only in speculation that they would die. And I think he's right. When I've had these conversations in the past with our DPW and engineering, the rationale I've been given is that the reality is, even if we try to save these trees, that by replacing the streets, a significant percentage of them will die within a few years. But the thing that's always bothered me is that whatever that percentage was, I forget what it was less than 100. And I recognize that it makes things easier just to take care of things all at once, but recognizing the assets of these trees are to our neighborhoods with direct impact on home values, I'd rather take the chance of replacing the street, knowing that some of them may die, but something less than 100% of them will die, and come back 2 years later and take out the ones that died. We recognize that we have to have new roads. We recognize there's a risk with that, but whatever inconvenience or even some additional cost that might entail, I think is worth it to preserve what I think is an asset for our city. So Councilman Donovic, thanks for putting this in committee. Hopefully we can bring it up soon.
Thank you, Vice President Barr. Next, I'll go to Councilmember McCullough. Councilmember McCullough.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to kind of highlight what Councilmember Toy brought up. I think a lot of it has to do with the transparency. I could tell you that I appreciate Mr. Sabo's email. I actually cruised down the street actually last night just to kind of see the trees up close in person. And I can tell you, looking at them, it might seem, that these things are completely healthy. And I know for the benefit of the citizens, there is a lot of work that goes in and a lot of time and effort and engineering from a lot of our professionals, whether it's Mr. Moore, Mr. Zelinsik. So, I always want to highlight that a lot of time and effort goes into making sure we do the best to, improve and maintain our tree canopy, because that is important. That's one of the reasons why we are one of the members of Tree City USA. So I totally agree that this committee of a whole, at least to get everybody at the table, and some of these questions can be answered. And maybe even, going forward, maybe a town hall type of style before we do something can have a lot of these questions cleared up before we get to a point of a petition. So thank you, everyone. That's all I'd say.
Thank you, Councilmember McCullough. Councilmember Jolly.
Thank you. I welcome the opportunity to have this discussion in a committee meeting. The one thing that I think, as I understand it, goes into this decision-making process that needs to be shared, that I think is of a very high level of importance, is the fact that when the road is replaced and the roots are terminated, are cut to accomplish the road replacement, there is some degree of a chance that one of these trees will topple over, causing injury to either a house or, God forbid, a person. And I think that's a large consideration here that needs to be noted. When we're talking about saving the trees, of course, we all want to save the trees and we want to minimize the removal of them to the greatest extent possible. But as I understand it in the communications that have come across from the engineering department and from DPW, there is an established protocol that says if the tree roots are removed on the roadside and have they previously been removed or cut or severed on the sidewalk side, that there's a good chance in a heavy windstorm or a heavy storm that the tree itself could topple over. So, I mean, there's a lot of issues that go into this. We can have a greater conversation. I'll be voting in support of putting in the committee meeting. But I think this goes beyond, just the aesthetics of the situation. We all love the aesthetics. We note them as a point of pride in our city. But in the grand scheme of things, if there's even a possibility that a large tree will fall over and damage a home or injure a person, that's something that's got to be considered very greatly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Jolly. Does anyone else like to, Councilmember White?
I just want to say thank you to the residents for organizing and coming to us with the united vote of concern about these trees that are going to be removed. I fully support putting this in committee. I know I live in Old Rosedale and I couldn't imagine it without the big gorgeous trees, and I know other neighborhoods in the city and residents feel the same way. So I welcome this conversation. I think that to look at it and try to come up with some compromise here would be great if we can figure that out. So thank you to the residents and to our city engineer, and I look forward to this further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember White. If there's no one else, I will continue with audience communication. I'll go to Melissa Barnes. Good evening, Ms. Barnes. You should.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Okay. Hi, Melissa Barnes. I live on Jameson and Castle Gardens, and I agree, basically with Mr. Crowley and Mr. Sevo and Mr. Bear, Mr. Donovic. I appreciate you guys helping us and wanting to understand what we're going through. Part of the, attraction to this subdivision is all the trees when you drive down the streets, and they're just gorgeous. And, on Jameson already, I believe there's like 3, maybe 4 trees left, the big trees on the medians there. And it does look bare, but if you take them all out, it's it's not the subdivision anymore. And it's very saddening to see X's on all these beautiful trees that make the subdivision pretty. And also give us oxygen. I mean, let's be honest, trees help us breathe. So the more you take out, the more oxygen I feel like is getting taken out as well. So, you know, with the neighborhood that we have, tons of children, a school, you know, I just feel that hopefully you guys can come to some kind of resolution of keeping our trees because they are healthy. I don't know why, I forget his name, but he said they seemed to be, Mr. McCullough, they seemed to be healthy. Well, I would love for people to actually go and see if they're healthy because I can tell you right now, they all look beautifully healthy. I'm not sure why he would say they seem to be. But it's just part of the attraction with this neighborhood. And it's just so sad to see our trees get taken out for no reason. And I understand maybe the roads need to be fixed, but also, I mean, our roads are actually okay. I don't know what gets fixed, maybe the sewers, maybe the water drains or something. I'm not sure, but to be honest, you know, the main roads need to be fixed before our subdivision roads, in my opinion. Just leave our trees, leave our oxygen. But that's all I really wanted to say. And I do appreciate everyone that's trying to help us as well. So I really don't know what else to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Barnes. Mr. Crowley has his hand up again. Unfortunately, Mr. Crowley, and this was read in the rules for audience communication, you were essentially at the end of your time, and people have the opportunity to address city council during audience communication once and any time. And I would encourage you, if you have other things you'd like us to know, to send us an email. All right. Next, I'm going to go to Carol. I see that Mr. Ruggiero would like to speak. Mr. Ruggiero, and I'm having a hard time saying your name tonight. If your comments are on an agenda item this evening, then we will welcome your comments during that particular agenda item. Next, I'm going to go to Carol. Carol, you should be able to unmute yourself. You able to unmute yourself?
Yes.
There we go. And if you could please give us your full name and your address, please.
My name is Carol Anderson. My address is 14930 Pier. I live in the Castle Gardens subdivision. And I would also like to address the fact that many trees in our subdivision are missing. And I felt for a long time that it's not beautiful to see. And I'd like to know what the replacement, why aren't they being replaced?
Well, I don't know if you were on earlier, but we have referred this issue to committee of the whole. Councilmember Donovic, supported by the vice president, offered this resolution, and in a minute we'll be voting on whether we are going to hold a committee of the whole. And that's when we would address this topic in depth. And the questions that you're asking really go to the administration, not to the city council, and would be appropriately answered and discussed in a committee meeting where we would invite the applicable or appropriate members of the administration, engineering, Department of Public Works to attend the meeting.
What was the date that the letters were sent out?
Pardon me?
What was the date the letters were sent out to the residents on Blue Skies?
April 21st, I believe, is what Mr. Zelinsik said.
And today is May 10th. That's not a very long time.
Excuse me, sir. The person has been recognized as Carol. And I know it's confusing in Zoom meetings, but we have one person talking at a time. So if you'd like to speak after Carol, then you would need to be recognized separately, please.
Okay. Well, I would just like to mention that when you do discuss the Blue Sky situation, could you also discuss the fact that the trees in the rest of the subdivision have not been replaced?
We will be looking at this issue holistically. I would assume, Mr. Donovic, am I correct, that your subject matter was road replacement and tree removal. And so anything that fell within tree removal due to road repairs, I'm sorry, I may have said road replacement, road repairs or sewer repairs could be part of that meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam President.
Okay, you answered my question. Thank you.
All right, and if you watch the city council website, you will see when that meeting is scheduled, and we will get that scheduled as quickly as we can.
Thank you.
If the council votes and approves setting up a committee of the whole, we still have to take the vote on that.
Okay.
Would anyone else from the audience like to speak on the issue related to the trees and road repairs? All right, seeing none. Madam Clerk, would you please take the vote on the resolution offered by Councilmember Donovic, supported by Vice President Barr, on referring the subject matter of road repairs, and I assume we'd add, Rob, if you're okay, sewer repairs and tree removal into a committee of the whole, referring it to committee of the whole.
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
Vice President Barr,
You're on mute.
All right, I hit the unmute, but I must have clicked it again too fast. Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
Aye, and there's unanimous approval, seven votes to 0 for putting this in, referring this issue to committee of the whole. We will look to schedule a committee of the whole meeting as quickly as possible, so thank you. We still have about 7 minutes left in the first half hour of audience communication. If there's anyone else in the audience who would like to address the council on any item not in this evening's agenda, now is an opportunity to do so. And I'm calling once. Okay, good evening. Good evening, Ms. Saltzman, and you should be able to address the, there we go. Good evening. And if you could please provide your name and address.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm stepping in for my wife. My name is Brian Saltzman. I live at 33444 Bobridge, Livonia. So that's in the Frankavilla subdivision.
Yep.
And so first thing, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me speak. I actually want to talk about the dog leash resolution.
That's Mr. Saltzman.
Yep.
The time to talk to us about that will be when we get to that agenda item. Audience communication at the beginning of the meeting is for citizens to speak to the council, address the council, any item not on this evening's agenda.
All right, fantastic.
All right, so stay with us. Thank you. All right, is there anyone else who would like to address the council on any item not on this evening's agenda? Calling once, calling twice. Final call. All right, so we'll move on with our agenda. Begin the, I'm sorry.
Nothing, I was trying.
Okay. Beginning with the consent agenda. Items 1 through 5 on tonight's agenda are on the consent agenda. They're voted on as one item. It doesn't mean that they are any less important than any other items on the agenda, but rather than when we reviewed them in our study meeting on April 26, 2021, they were determined not to be controversial in nature. Councilmember White.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Support from Councilmember Jolly. Clerk Nash, would you please take the vote on approval of the consent agenda?
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
Vice President Barr,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
Aye, and the consent agenda is approved unanimously by all 7 members of the council. That we move on to unfinished business, beginning with item number 6. This is a proposed amendment to the Livonia Code of Ordinances as amended. This comes to us from the Department of Law to amend the Historic Preservation Commission Ordinance, Chapter 2.56, Section 020, Definitions, Section 050, Historic Preservation Commission, Creation and Membership, and Section 060, Commission Powers and Council Resolution 10-21. Council. Councilmember White.
I will offer first reading to the proposed ordinance amendment.
Thank you. And just as a reminder to those in the audience, when we are contemplating or when we have on the agenda an amendment to the Code of Ordinances, we do not vote on it. And as we do with normal items, it gets what's given a first read, and there's no voting or discussion on voting until the following meeting. Number 7 is also a roll call vote. Yes, it is a roll call vote. This is also a proposed amendment to the Livonia Code of Ordinances as amended, coming to us from the Department of Law to amend section 040L, 040M, and 400 of Title 6, Chapter 1, Animals of the Livonia Code of Ordinances as amended, and section 110 of Title 12, Chapter 20, Public Lands, Council Resolution 03-21. Council. Member Jolly?
Madam President, I'd like to offer a second reading, but I would like to strike the language referring to the remote electronic training collar being included.
Okay.
I don't know if that's enough information at this point, but that's my motion.
I'm going to go. One moment. Councilmember Toy, Councilmember McCullough, did you have your hand up to offer support?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, that's all right. City Attorney Bernier, are we able to, is that sufficient information for the record that we are removing the reference to?
Just want to make sure I'm clear on it. There's a motion on the table by Councilmember Jolly, supported by, I believe it was Brandon McCullough.
It was.
McCullough, to strike the language dealing with the alternative of the electronic trading device from the ordinance. And then if that passes, then there'll be a second reading of that ordinance with that one little section missing.
Yes, was that your intent, Councilmember Jolly? And
that's correct. Thank you.
Your understanding of what you were supporting, Councilmember McCullough? All right, thank you. All right, Councilmember Jolly.
So just to explain my rationale for doing this, I believe that the leash ordinance as it stands without the electronic collar is warranted in a community such as ours. I think we've heard many people call in. I've heard a lot of people express in the community different circumstances that they have had. One of the big factors for myself in considering this and supporting the leash but not the electronic shock collar option is really that there's a certain peace of mind that goes with people in the community who are in public who see that another dog is on a leash. It puts them on notice that the dog is under control. When we start going down the road of an electronic shock collar, although I understand that that could be useful in some circumstances, we are first and foremost relying on the response time of the person holding the remote to engage the animal, to correct them. But also the other people who are in the community who are in the circumstances of being around this animal, they don't have the reassurance that the dog is under control. I've seen children, I've seen adults be scared and run away from a dog that is running at large. Whether or not that dog has an electronic shock collar on it and somebody else has a remote further away, that doesn't give them any peace of mind to enjoy themselves as they're enjoying our community. So at this time, I'd like to proceed forward with only the language regarding the leash itself and not the shock collar. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the council before I go to the audience? Councilmember Toy?
I would agree with that. Those collars are not only, questionable in regards to, I know that some trainers use them, but I'm not sure they're always healthy for the animal as well, is what I've read up on. So, I applaud Councilman Jolly, Councilman McCullough for putting that forward, that amendment. Thank you.
Anyone else before I go to the audience? All right, we'll go to the audience, beginning with the phone number, ending 8038. And if you'd like to address the council, if you could please press *6 on your phone. You should be able to unmute yourself. There we go. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Michael Hayes. I live at 18798 Norwich. I've spoken the last few meetings about the electronic collars. They're really a correction collar. There's veterinary studies, widely accepted, how effective it is. And I'm trying to understand, one of the council members feels that a dog in a leash, when conversation in the city council, you guys were saying somebody could have a 20-foot leash, and you're saying that that dog is going to be under control more so than my dog on a correction collar. And what about people that are using electronic fences? You're saying that an electronic fence is humane, but my e-collar, my e-collar not. So I find fault with that project. I mean, it's very obvious. The veterinaries, there's all kinds of research. Councilwoman Choi said about research. So the veterinarians community accepts the use of correction collars as not abusive. You're thinking about correction collars from 25 years ago, not the ones that are out here in 2021. There's a warning that comes before it. You can give them a beep. And as far as, like I say, having your pet under control. And I think that what's happening here is the good dog owners are automatically, you're throwing us in with bad dog owners. And that's the part that I find that I have a hard time accepting. A city of Livonia, which is so willing to look at, what's good for our residents. Give me one instance of a resident on an e-collar having a problem, interact with anybody in their neighborhood. And I bet you can't give me one. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I think that the language, having the e-collar, is a very good way to offer, some opportunity for both parties. And people with e-collars, we use leashes too. We're not just running around with just an e-collar. We have our leashes with us. The only time the dog is off the lead is when we do get to an open. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. All right, and again, and just for if any of the people speaking during this part, agenda items weren't on when our parliamentarian, Councilmember White, reads the rules. During specific agenda items, the audience is limited to 2 minutes in comments. All right, and I think this was Mr. Saltzman. There we go. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. And thank you again for allowing me to speak here. I wanted to finish up on what Mr. Hayes is saying. So with us that use a e-collar, we usually go to a bigger field and then unleash our dog. We don't just walk down any kind of street or anything from there. But in my mind, like with this rash reaction of, okay, you can't ever let your dog off, I almost look at it with just like with cars. I had a drunk driver hit a tree in front of my house the other day. At least like in our subdivision. Are we going to stop people from driving then just because we have a few instances of that? Right? I feel like you're punishing all dogs for, I don't know how many instances we have of dog attacks in Livonia or bad dogs doing bad stuff from there, but it's one of those I feel like it's being kind of rash, just going on like the overall leash law. So I do support the e-collar part in the language of I want to say bill, because I know that's probably the wrong wordage for you. So, but that's all I just wanted to say. And thank you again for allowing me to speak.
Thank you for taking the time to contact us. All right, next we'll go to, who shows up is Ms. Marlette. Good evening. You should be able to unmute. There you go.
Hi, good evening.
Name and address. Good evening.
I'm Jennifer Marlette. My address is 33497 Curtis. And I just wanted to say I'm in support of having the e-collar language on the law as well. Personally, I've been walking my dog on an e-collar and have had other dogs in the area that were on one of those extendable leashes, like the ones that extend as they walk. And we were actually attacked by those two dogs while my dog on her e-collar was, standing right next to me. So I think the imperative language in that bill is as long as the owner has the dog under their control, it shouldn't really matter if it's a leash or an e-collar, as long as the person has them under control. And everyone I know who walks with a e-collar or uses the e-collar has their controller visible, either hanging from their neck or readily in their hand to, activate it if needed. So I always feel safe. I feel safer when I see dogs on e-collars versus extended leashes myself. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for taking the time to call us, Ms. Marlette. Next, we'll go to Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, you should be able to unmute yourself, and if you could give us your name and address.
Yep, thank you, President McIntyre. Stephen Johnson, 18240 Sunset. Yeah, the difference is that there is no substitute for a physical leash. E-collars and shock collars, you've been sent all kinds of information from all kinds of groups, including PETA. This is not acceptable for reasonable control. We're talking about public safety here. You get these dogs running away from the owners. They're in an area where the owner doesn't see them. There's no way that they know that that dog is not in an area where people will be harmed. But I strongly support the proposed amendment to the ordinance. I do, however, think that the language of the ordinance should be required that the dogs be in a fenced area if off the owner's property. It would eliminate any gray area of the ordinance and assure public safety and allow less difficulty in enforcement. That's what you got to think about when they get a call, animal enforcement, animal control, they're going to come out there and now they're going to have to find out if the people have permission. What kind of permission? Are they going to have some paper from the landowner? So I think you should really consider if they're going to be at another property, that the property be fenced in. Thanks much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anyone else? Vice President Barr.
Thank you, Madam President. I understand the points on both sides of this. I really do. I think it's important to frame this conversation with what we were originally trying to do. And Mr. Johnson's well familiar with this because, frankly, he had a big role in why we're even talking about this, and that's dogs running loose over at Bryant, the old Bryant property. The issue was dogs being run loose and essentially unattended. We've had people in this city, from my observation, the vast majority of people are walking with leashes already because it's what they're most comfortable with. We have many people that are using these e-collars without a problem. I met more over the weekend that approached me about it and said, my dog's got an e-collar on right now. I've done extensive research on this. I'm not a dog owner, so I've done extensive research on this since our last meeting. I think what Mr. Hayes said is correct, that there's a difference between the collars of 25 to 30 years ago and today. I'm not uncomfortable with the notion of a control collar. I don't think it's inhumane. I just feel like the language that was put before us tonight with the e-collar, as one of the audience members said, it acknowledges the good owners who are already using this responsibly. It's already putting a more restrictive ordinance in place. Today, we don't even have a leash law. So anything we do tonight is an improvement from that. I'm going to go ahead and Paul, I have a question through the chair to Paul, the city attorney. So I understand what Mr. Jolly's done. He's essentially offered first reading on a new ordinance, right? So
no, actually, no. He made a motion to amend the wording of the ordinance, and we'd be at a second reading right now. We had first reading on it at the last meeting, where it was amended and that provision was put in there. And now we're at the point of a second reading, but there's an amendment to take out that portion that was put in at the first meeting. So in other words, we'd be right back to where we were at the first reading before the amendment was added.
So I'm not ignorant of where I think this ends up, but in the true spirit of open meetings here, I honestly don't know where all my colleagues are on this. Is it possible for me to offer second reading on what's been put forth with us tonight, and we take a vote on that if there's support and see where we stand. And if it fails, it falls back to what Mr. Jolly did.
It's actually a question for the parliamentarian, but I think the parliamentary rules are, since there's a motion on the table, we have to have a vote on it first.
So, okay, so if there's a motion on the table, then it's not a first reading. We would take up first reading at the next meeting?
No, that's not true. This would, if the motion passes, if Mr. Jolly's motion passes by the council, then we would have the second reading on the ordinance with the amended language. The council can amend the language of the ordinance during the readings.
Okay. I believe you. I'm just processing this because usually we don't have a support for a first reading, but
It's actually a question for the parliamentarian, but that's my understanding.
And I agree with that. So I think we should move forward on the motion first and then offer the second reading if the motion passes and see what happens with the vote.
Okay, so if we're in the business of amending this, may I ask, and I had said this last time, and that discussion got us to where we are now, but if we're going to take out this electronic training thing, I would also like to take out the last sentence in that paragraph, which reads, "The leash shall be of sufficient strength and length to restrain the particular animal." I think that's totally unnecessary when the preceding sentence says, "Tethered to a suitable leash, which is securely held by a person of an appropriate age and discretion with the ability to control the animal." We're accomplishing what we need to with that first sentence. I'm probably splitting hairs, but I think that last sentence about the leash being sufficient strength and length, number one, it's ambiguous to begin with. Number two, it repeats the intent of the previous sentence. And number three, it just removes some of the physical leash specific language, which maybe has no bearing in a future court of law, but at least leaves a non-zero chance that it might. So if Jim's okay with that, with his, I just ask that if we're going to take off the electronic training collar, that we take off the sentence that follows as well.
If I may, Madam President.
Please.
I would just ask a question for clarification to Paul, Mr. Bernier, so that we all know what we're talking about here. If I were to accept the additional amendment of Scott on my motion, we are still talking about a 10-foot leash here as is currently defined in the ordinance language, correct?
The language, if Vice President Barr's amendment is accepted and it's voted on, the language would end at, as I understand it, unless such animal is tethered to a suitable leash, which is securely held by a person of an appropriate age and discretion with the ability to control the animal, period.
That's right.
What would be eliminated is the last sentence that Mr. Barr wanted gone, which would be, "The leash shall be of sufficient strength and length to restrain the particular animal." There would be no, in either event, there is nothing in the ordinance that says, like as you see sometimes, that a dog has to be on a 6-foot leash or a 10-foot leash. And the reason we did this, quite frankly, was because oftentimes people use training leashes, which are 20 feet long or so, when they're actually training a dog to operate it. So we were kind of concerned about that. And we do have a lot of people with those expandable leashes.
Okay, so Paul, here's my problem with that. If you go to the definition section, it clearly defines a suitable leash, and it defines it as being, let me see, get the exact language here. On a suitable leash is defined as that the animal is attached to a leash that is no more than 10 feet in length and of such material that the leash restrains the type and size of animal to which it is attached. Does that not enforce a 10-foot limit?
Council, Mr. Jolly, where are you looking at for that?
I'm looking in the definition section of 6.01.040 definitions.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. The suitable leash then would be defined as a 10-foot leash.
Okay, so long as the 10-foot leash remains in place, and I think that's appropriate, I'll accept what Mr. Barr is offering as part of my motion as well.
Yeah, just so we're all on the same page and we understand, if Mr. Barr's amendment to the amendment is accepted and is voted on, the leash law would be then a maximum of 10 feet.
Thank you.
So before I go to Councilmember Donovic and McCullough, so I understand. Are we're still voting, we're voting on what Mr. Jolly has offered, but now there's another change to the amendment as offered by Mr. Jolly. Is that correct?
Correct. The last sentence would also be removed from the proposed ordinance.
So I need to go back to the supporter.
I'll support that.
Okay, Councilmember McCullough. All right, I'll go next to Vice President Barr and then to Councilmember McCullough, and then we'll go back to the audience.
Madam President, first of all, thanks to Councilman Jolly for bringing out that detail, which hasn't come out in any previous discussions. In light of this whole discussion, we've done this too much lately, and I've been guilty of it at times. We're way deeper into this than what we should be in a regular meeting. We're now dealing with a lot of moving parts. I'd like to offer a substitute resolution that we send this to committee of the whole.
Can we? Who supported that? Mr. Byrne, you're parliamentarian. Do we have to finish the resolution that's on the floor, or can we vote at this point on a substitute resolution?
I'm going to leave that to the parliamentarian.
You need to vote on the motion that's on the floor unless there's a willingness on the part of the, the maker of the motion and the supporter to put it in committee. But right now we need to move forward on the resolution that's on the table, the motion that's on the table.
Vice President Barr.
I thought we've done this many times. I thought the whole purpose of a substitute resolution, we would now vote as to whether to accept the substitute. That's the whole purpose of a substitute, is to usurp what's currently on the floor. That's why we do that.
Actually, that's correct. In terms of a motion to substitute, we would have to vote on the motion to substitute first and then go back to the original motion.
So,
sorry for the confusion, but that's correct.
That's
there is a motion to substitute, so we would need to vote on the motion to substitute first.
And we have support from Councilmember Donovic.
Right.
So now we have discussion on, we have discussion on the motion to substitute, correct?
On whether to substitute, correct?
Right, that's what I meant, on whether to substitute, right? Not on the substitute.
Right, we would vote on whether to substitute.
Okay, so is there any discussion on, not on the substance of the substitution, but whether we will accept a substitution, correct? Did I say that correctly? Okay. Councilmember McCullough.
Thank you, Madam President. I just kind of want to just touch base on, sending it to committee of a whole, in my opinion. We've been round and round and round. I've spent a ton of time with I know we've all spent multiple hours and time on this. The 10-foot rule has always been in the definitions. It's been there. It's been there the whole time. It's been in the packet. My opinion on this is that, I'd like to see a vote, whether it does something. I'd like to see something get at least voted on. If we send it to committee, it's just going to prolong it. I think all the information's there. Obviously, this is just my opinion. The shock collar aspect of it, and me touching base on that, there's a lot of variables that go into it outside the inhumane aspects that already exist with that. There's questions on battery life. There's questions on frequency. There's questions on length. And it almost goes back to, having, and then even the startling factor with someone walking up to a dog that's not on a leash. So I digress on a lot of that, but I just kind of want to stay for that. I think punting it to a committee of a whole just prolongs this whole situation. The fact of the matter is, the original vote that we're going to have excludes the shock collars. It identifies the 10-foot leash. And yes or no, are we going to vote on a leash law for the city? Thank you.
Councilmember Donovic.
Thank you, Madam President. I know there's been a lot of discussion on this, but one of the residents, Mr. Johnson, had brought up a good point earlier that I think I'd like to listen to more about the specifics about dogs being in a fenced-in area off a leash. I think that's what this whole discussion initially started off of, was animals being in the public way of people and just running around with no collar or a leash. I think that if somebody wants to use an e-collar, they aren't the same e-collars from 20, 30 years ago. You should be allowed to use that. But I also understand that when you're in the public, walking your animal, your dog, the dog should be on a leash. So I understand there's a lot of back and forth about that, but my main concern is the point that the resident had brought up earlier in regards to the animal being in a fenced-in area when off a leash. And apparently the ordinance wasn't very specific on that. And I've been trying to read and find that specific, and I have not yet. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll go, was that it, Mr. Donovic? Okay, I'm going to go to the audience. I'm going to remind the audience that right now the agenda item, the item that we're discussing is on whether or not we're going to accept a substitute resolution to put this back into committee.
Madam President,
Yes,
with respect, I don't think you necessarily have to go to the audience for a substitute vote. I mean, there will be another opportunity.
I think you're right. You're right.
Trying to move it along.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. All right. So those in the audience who wish to speak, what we're doing right now is a technicality, a technical issue as to whether to take a substitute resolution to put this into committee. Mr. Barr, did you specify? Committee?
I said committee of the whole.
Committee of the whole, not on the substance of the leash law. So if no one else on the council has any comments on voting on whether to accept a substitute resolution, clerk, could you please take the vote on accepting a substitute resolution?
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
No.
Councilmember Toy,
No.
Vice President Barr,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
No.
President McIntyre.
No. So the motion to accept the substitute fails. So now we go back to where we were with accepting the changes that were offered by Councilmember Jolly and supported by Vice President Barr. Councilmember McCullough. Vice President Barr, and then I'll go back to
So I want to be clear. So we will not be taking a vote on this tonight, right? This would just be first reading with the support of Councilman McCullough. This is a first reading. We would take a vote presumably after next time.
No, and let me see if I've got this right. We would be taking the vote first on whether to accept the amended language, and then we would be voting on a second read with the amended language in it. Is that correct?
I think you have it. I think you have it half right. Tell me if I'm wrong. From what I'm hearing, we would vote for the amended language, and then if that passes, this would become a first reading, and we'd have to take up second. I thought that's what Paul said.
No, Council, if we have, just so if I can try and make it clear, at this point in time, there is a motion on the table to amend the language of the proposed ordinance, which would eliminate the last sentence and also take out the issue of the electronic tether.
And this would be the second reading.
And then there would be the second reading on it, and we'd have a roll call vote on passing the ordinance or failing.
Okay, well, if that's the case, I'll just make this final comment. I can't support where this has ended up. I'm in favor of a leash law. I think this is, again, overbearing. I think it's going after the wrong people. I'm just going to speak. I'm not going to repeat what I said earlier. I'm going to speak specifically to a few things Councilman McCullough said, just to show what some of my concern is with this. He commented how the definition of a leash length has been in there the whole time. Yeah, but we didn't have an ordinance that required a leash. He talked about how with the electronic collar, you don't have the benefit of a child seeing that the dog is restrained. the same thing goes for someone with an electric fence. We deal with that every day in our neighborhoods. As someone who was bit by a dog once while delivering Livonia observers with an electric fence, I can speak from experience with that. And then he brought up the question of the question of whether you can stop it. We have the same issue with someone with a leash with a big dog that can't control it on the leash. So with every single situation he talked about, you can say we have the same problem, even without the e-collar stuff in there. It's the problem you get into when you try to over-specify this stuff. And we had originally an ability to do something this city has never done before, which was to put a tether requirement in there. I just think this is a step too far. I'm in favor of the leash idea. I'm not in favor of not including the e-collar. So that's it for me. Thanks.
All right, at this time, I'll go back to the audience. Phone number 6692, and I believe you press #6 to unmute yourself. Able to unmute yourself, 6692. If you're joining us by phone, it's #6. I'm sorry, *6. You should be able to unmute yourself by hitting *6. All right, I'm going to go on to.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Good evening, and we need your name and address, please. Okay, let's try this again. We had you for a moment. You should be able to press *6 to unmute yourself. All right, there we go. Good evening. 6692, good evening. All right, you are unmuted and you should be able to address the council.
Ooh.
Hello, are you there, 6692? You're unmuted. All right, I'm going to go on then to the next audience member, and then we'll come back to, we'll try to come back to 6692. And now I'm going to go to 6518. You should be able to unmute yourself by pressing *6.
Hello, this is Carissa Perrin from Westland, Michigan.
Hi.
And hello. And I was calling in to oppose the e-collar being an okay option. I am actually a dog trainer and a pet sitter. And, you know, if pets get it in their mind that they're in prey mode, that, you know, whether it's a rabbit or a person or a scary object, whatever the case might be, the e-collar doesn't necessarily support the fact that they won't charge or attack. So I highly recommend a longer leash where you can still control the pet, but they can still get exercise. So that would be my recommendation regarding that. So I wanted to give you my thoughts on this matter, being a professional trainer.
Thank you very much for taking the time to call. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll try to go back to 6692. If you could press *6 to unmute yourself, please. All right, you should be, you're unmuted and we should be able to hear you. Good evening, 6692. All right, we know that Zoom and telephone connections can be difficult, but everything on our end is working. All right, well, we've lost 6692. So if there's anyone else, is there anyone else on the audience that would like to comment? All right, Ms. Shook, you should be able to unmute yourself. Good evening.
I just want to
And
say that.
could you please give us your name and your address?
Yep, sorry. Lori Shook. I live on Granada in Kimberly Oaks. I just want to say that what Councilmember Jolly said is really what my concern is. I do live in a neighborhood that has 4 very, very large dogs that aren't on leashes. I can't tell you if they have e-collars or not because I stay as far away as I can possibly get. When I'm walking, I don't know if the dog is under control or not if they don't have a leash on. And I've had, a couple scary situations. So I have a fear of that. That's why I was hoping there would be a leash law, and I hope it happens soon. And that's it. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the council on this item? Calling once, twice, final call for audience comments on this item. All right, seeing none. Madam Clerk, would you please take the vote on accepting the amended language from Councilmember Jolly, supported by Councilmember McCullough?
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
Vice President Barr,
No.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
No. The vote to accept the amended or to change to amend the language of the ordinance to strike the provision for e-collars is approved 5-2. And so now we go on to the discussion. Now we need someone. Councilmember Jolly, now we need someone to offer second read. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam President, and I'll do so at this time.
All right. Councilmember Jolly has offered second read. Support?
I'll support.
Support from Councilmember McCullough. Discussion.
Madam Chair.
I'll go first to Councilmember White and then Councilmember Toy.
Just a clarification, that last sentence, is that still out or is that in?
I'm sorry, it's out.
So it's both the issue with not including the control collar and taking out that last sentence, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Could I clarify, just to make sure, since we have to draft the ordinance and make sure it gets correct? As I understand it, we're going to eliminate the little area talks about the electronic tether and the last sentence, but the rest of it will remain exactly the same as I read it before with the amendment as passed.
Yes.
If, provided, of course, council votes to approve the ordinance.
All right. Any discussion from council? Any additional discussion from the audience? Councilmember McCullough and then Councilmember Toy.
Thank you, Madam President. I just, now that we kind of went back and forth and had some interesting votes and addendums, the leash, kind of touching base, I know we've talked about it a lot. This is something that I know numerous communities around us do have a leash law. I think a lot of people even have spoke at audience comment that they always thought that we did have a leash law. I do hope that the vote goes through tonight. I think it will be a good step to protecting residents, citizens, and even the animals as we go forward. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Toy.
I would just like to echo, I was going to pretty much say the same thing. And as we draft new laws or new ordinances, remember, down the road, it can always be changed. For right now, with the information we all have and the decisions we have to make, I think this is the best we can do to get something in place so that, again, it's safe for the resident and safe for the animals and all concerned. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Vice President Barr?
Obviously, I made my feelings known about the change. I don't like the direction we've gone with this. However, and this can sometimes be hard to follow, but I do agree with a leash law. Having had the discussion and the debate about whether to change it and having come down on the losing side of that with what we have before us now, I will be supporting this now. I don't like where it's ended up, but we've had that debate. That debate is closed. I'll be supporting this. Thanks.
Councilmember Donovic.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to vote to support this because I support keeping dogs on leashes in public areas. I don't support creating language that says e-collars are bad or are good. There's a lot of back and forth from a lot of professionals on either side of that aisle. A lot of professionals say that e-collars are great. A lot of other professionals say that e-collars are bad. So I don't take an opinion on whether they are good or bad because I just don't know enough about them. However, I do think that the city of Livonia does need some sort of ordinance to say that if you're going to take your animal out in public, it needs to be under control. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Councilmember Jolly.
Thank you, Madam President. I would just like to state that I'm happy with the current reading of this for the main purpose that it will give peace of mind to others in our community who may be afraid of animals or have had some poor interaction with an animal in the past, or even who are not, but it does give them reasonable assurance that the animals are under control, especially if they have young children or they are vulnerable in some way. So I think this is a positive step forward, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Jolly. I will give one more opportunity for 6692 to address the council. All right. You should be able to unmute yourself by pressing *6.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, you know.
I think you have, ma'am, I think you have quite a bit of background noise.
Ordinance has been brought up.
Are you on a speakerphone by some
Numerous occasions.
He has the meeting on in the background, which is causing
He's
him
got the
delay.
meeting on, yeah.
Yeah, if you could take yourself off speaker or turn the volume down of the meeting, it would be very helpful, please.
I'm not on speaker.
Okay, could you turn down the volume? It sounds like you have the meeting on in the background. Turn down the volume. It sounds like you have the meeting on in the background. Turn down the volume. It sounds like you have the meeting on in the background.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Just continue, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Continue, please.
Can you hear me now? I am disappointed. This item has been brought up before. And been voted down. Regarding leash law. Either you are a responsible owner of your dog, or you're not. For me not to be able to take my animal to a field to run, I feel as though it's not fair to those of us who are responsible animal owners. So to say off property must be on leash is not fair. I will close with that comment.
All right. Thank you for your persistence and trying to get through this tonight, and thank you for calling in. All right. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to? Did we already hear from 8038? Okay.
That's a winning lotto number?
Good evening. Number ending in 8038. You should be able to address the council. You could please give us your name and your address.
This is Mike Hayes. I spoke with you earlier. I thought, do I get an opportunity to readdress the council? Is that acceptable?
No, I thought we had heard from you, Mr. Hayes. You're allowed one audience, you may address the council once during audience communication and once during each agenda item. So thank you. All right, is there anyone else who'd like to address the council who has not addressed the council on this agenda item number 7? Okay, seeing none.
Madam President, I'm sorry, this will be very fast. I'm reading through the legalese here. There's a few things I don't understand. I know the way this vote is going to go. I explained why I was going to vote yes. I am going to vote no on this just to reinforce my disapproval of where this has ended up. Not sure if that's exactly the right thing. It's not going to matter, but I said I was going to vote yes. I will be voting no. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Okay, Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll call vote on the second reading of the ordinance as we voted to amend it with the language provided by Councilmember Jolly, supported by Councilmember McCullough.
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
Vice President Barr,
No. No.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
No, and the amendment is approved by a 5-2 vote of the council. The ordinance will become effective upon publication in the newspaper. Item number 8 is also a roll call. This is a proposed amendment to the Livonia Code of Ordinances as amended. This comes from the Department of the Law to amend Section 350 of Title 6, Chapter 1, Animals, Council Resolution 43-21. The first reading was given by Council Member Brandon McCullough on Monday, April 26, 2021. Councilmember McCullough?
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to amend the proposed ordinance to remove Section E entirely.
Which is, could you please for the...
Section E is the description in depth on the shelter itself.
All right, so now do we have support?
I'll support that, Madam President.
Yeah.
All right. Any discussion before I go to the audience? Councilmember McCullough.
So this is another one, and I hate to add 16 different layers to it, but the original motion and the ordinance that came through, we got a lot of feedback on the specifics of the shelter and how that could be prescribed as being an overreach. And to some aspects, I totally agree. If you look at the ordinances, the way it sits, it does include shelter. So that does give our enforcement officers the ability to define negligence based on shelter. It's very broad, but it's not as specific. However, I still do support the National Weather Service warning addition. And just to kind of get a little bit in depth, I did my research, I got all my papers. Some of the severe National Weather Service warnings include a blizzard warning, that's snow or that's I think it's sustained winds of 35 miles an hour with a greater or no snow visibility. That's something that I don't think is an overreach. A winter storm warning, which is 7 inches or more of snow that happens, I think last year it was 6 times. An ice storm warning, which is a 1/4 inch of ice accumulation or more, which is substantial. A freeze warning, which then covers aspects of a freeze advisory to -25. The wind chill advisory, which also goes into effect for -20 to -25. A high wind warning, which is sustained winds of 40 miles an hour or more in 1 hour. There's more and more. I can continue to go, but what I'm trying to point out is that the actual National Weather Service warnings seem to be common sense approaches. And I did recognize that the shelter might be a little bit overstepping. I would like to, obviously I made the motion. I'd like to see this addition go. I think it does give our animal control officers a little bit extra enforceable template to go through. So that is my reasoning on that motion. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Jolly.
Thank you, Madam President. So today, I'll speak for myself, but I think a lot of us found ourselves thinking about this ordinance change and weighing its merits throughout the day. I know I spent a significant portion of my day doing so. Section E that Mr. McCullough has made a motion to strike, I believe accounted for a large proportion of that consideration throughout the day. The more that we dug into that language that was proposed before us, I think some of us felt less comfortable with being so specific in our approach to laying out regulations here. So I'm happy to see that go. I think that does clarify this. I think it simplifies it much more so than it would have been. But I do also support the National Weather Service clause in this ordinance. I think that's, as Councilman McCullough stated, it is a simple and very common sense approach to protect animals in our community. I also looked up what different types of National Weather Service severe weather warnings would be. And there's something like extreme temperatures, like negative degrees and things of that nature. We're not even talking about freezing, but extreme freezing. So I am absolutely in support of this with the amendment that Mr. McCullough has stated on the record, and I think it is a no-brainer with the loss of Section E. But then again, I just want to state for the record, with Section E, I would not be voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Jolly. Vice President Barr.
Thanks. Well, I'm certainly glad that some residents were able to get through where I apparently wasn't a couple weeks ago, and that we're all on the same page with Section E. I still think that we have to remember that this is a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. The only reason we're talking about this is because of a knee-jerk reaction to a situation that was not what it was purported to be by some protesters from outside of our community that made an issue of it, where some people looked into someone's backyard, a private owner's backyard, and made assumptions about how animals were being treated that were false and were shown to be false. The only reason we're talking about this is because we took that bait and said we should do something with it. There is nothing that needs to be done here. It already says, as Councilman McCullough pointed out, and as I pointed out 2 weeks ago, that shelter is already included in there. And we're now telling residents that, and even with the abundant feedback that I've gotten from residents in opposition to what we were looking to do, would talk about, would still see the requirement for a climate controlled situation as overreach. Now, I say that recognizing that the vast majority of pet owners in this community are going to be doing that anyway. But it just reinforces my point that we're swinging a bat at a ball that doesn't exist. Our current ordinance is adequate, as our law department said it was. I'm obviously pleased with the direction this has gone, but I don't think we need to do anything. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Toy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I finally found something. I wanted to ask to the city attorney, if I may, where does that leave us in this whole gamut of the shelter now? If we take out E, so what is this doing again? I know, I'm sorry.
No, Council, I shouldn't have let, this has been something that we've been looking at for a long time because of the request of council to take a look at this.
Right.
It was a tough ordinance to draft because we were given, from Mr. Barr to Mr. McCullough to Mr. Jolly, there was a lot of different feedback that the law department was getting to try to draft an ordinance. And it was a tough one to draft. And we drafted this and we don't, quite frankly, the law department does not have a position on which way we think council should go either way. This is completely a policy decision for council to make either way. I believe Mr. Barr, Vice President Barr was completely right. in that we have the tools to prosecute cases under the current ordinance. That doesn't mean that the current ordinance can't be enhanced and can't be fixed, as Mr. McCullough said. I think the national weather, if somebody left their Chihuahua out in severe weather, whether we have that section or not, we're still going to prosecute the person for either cruelty or neglect, whether or not council chooses to put that in or not put it in. It does, however, advise citizens and put them on notice that if we do have this weather condition, all dogs have to be brought into the house. I had the conversations today with the American Kennels Club, their national, they called up because they were concerned about us having specific weather conditions in, because all dogs tolerate temperatures differently. A Chihuahua and a Malamute are different animals. And so they were very concerned about us, and they liked the idea of the National Weather Service, but of course they don't have a vote on the issue. But they like that. As far as the law department is concerned, we can enforce it either with this or without it. We can enforce bad weather. So this is really boils down to a policy decision, and whether council wants to send out send a message that we are very serious about severe weather. So that's really what it boils down to in a lot of respects.
So as a dog, okay, so basically my little dog house is good enough for my dogs, right? It depends on the weather now, whether it's
depends on the weather.
a tornado or a hailstorm.
Right.
Yeah, and then it depends on my breed of my dog.
Correct. If your little Chihuahua is left out in 15 below, I don't care what kind of shelter you have it in, you're going to be getting a knock on the door from us. On the other hand, if my Labradoodle is outside in 0-degree weather in a shelter much like the Beagles were in, that's in my opinion, an adequate shelter. It's a tough ordinance to draft, and that's why we didn't want to get specific with weather conditions. We do, again, when we drafted the proposed ordinance and we talked about the type of shelter, any good owner, I hope, would put their dog in a shelter, an adequate shelter that doesn't allow for leaking and wind and the conditions to get into it. And if they don't have that adequate shelter, we still have the tools, in my opinion, to prosecute them for neglect on it. This is an additional tool. It's an additional notice. It's an additional warning. But I don't think it necessarily gives us any more power to prosecute someone who's abusing a dog.
And to your points, thank you, Madam Chair. A lot of the calls I was getting today were, and emails or texts, however they came, and yet we're elected to govern. I want to make that clear. And we take an oath of office to uphold the safety of our residents and, all living things here. But they were concerned that we were kind of overstepping to the point where we're, trying to make demands on them when they already follow rules. So, it's a tough call, as our city attorney's saying, and I'm still trying to figure out which way to vote. So if anybody's got any great ideas out there, help me out.
Vice President Barr.
I'll just tack on one more thing to what Paul said. With what we're doing here, if you've got a beagle or another one of those species that is fine being out in those conditions, a beagle laying in straw in a non-climate controlled shelter, and perfectly fine from what I know from people that own those dogs and what I've learned over the last few weeks, that we pass this and we are subjecting that person to be eligibly put in jail for 93 days and a $500 fine. That's what this ordinance would say if we did this. It's a total overstep. And if we were starting from scratch, knowing what we know now, we'd be doing nothing. The only reason we're still talking about this is because someone proposed to do something and we're trying to walk back from it. We need to remember where this started. Nothing needs to be done. I think I'm done.
Councilmember White.
I just want to add my 2 cents here, in that all the years that I served in the city attorney's office, I don't ever remember a time when we tried to prosecute someone for cruelty to an animal and found that our ordinance language was insufficient. I also agree that what we have on the books is sufficient, and we don't hesitate to use that ordinance where it's properly called for. So I will not be in support of changing our ordinance. Thank you.
Councilmember McCullough and then Councilmember Donovan.
Madam President, through the chair to Mr. Bernier, a point of clarification. When we do say this is just strengthening our process, if I'm correct, it does go a little bit further because obviously in the event that there is a warning issued by the National Weather Service, the pet owner would have to bring said animal into a controlled environment, correct?
You're absolutely right about that. Yes, no, you're right about that. If what the amendment as you envision it, Mr. McCullough, would be the only difference is we could probably prosecute anyway because it would probably be neglect to leave a dog out in that weather like that, like you were describing that the National Weather Service would be. It probably would be negligent anyways to do that or neglect on the dog or the animal. But if we had the language that you're proposing in there, it definitely by definition would make it neglect to leave the dog out. So it changes it in the perspective of it is neglect if you have these certain weather conditions and the animal is not in a climate controlled environment.
Thank you.
So it does. So I guess I did misspeak myself a little bit. It does strengthen it in that condition, in that situation when you get a severe weather warning in Livonia.
No, and thank you. And just to kind of point out, I mean, there's one in here that is, in the event of a tornado warning. And I'm sorry, but if that's overreach, then I got to look at something a little bit different. But if there's a tornado, that means the tornado has touched down within city limits. And I don't think it's too much to ask to bring your domestic animals inside. Also with the excessive heat warning or the extreme, cold temperatures, -25 to 30. I mean, these instances happen maybe, 12 to 15 times in a season. And I think it just adds an extra layer. Whatever the vote does go for, I do, appreciate my colleagues' perspectives, but this is something that I think would help eliminate any of the bad actors out there. So I just wanted to touch base on that. Thank you.
Councilmember Donovan.
Thank you, Madam President. I know myself and my colleagues on council oppose animal abuse and cruelty to pets. That's why we're having the discussion we're having. But like in our package, the review of our current ordinance shows that surrounding cities have virtually the same local laws regarding animal cruelty that we already do. So our animal control department already has the local ordinances and resources to protect animals that are being abused. And the city already has a local ordinance to penalize residents for that cruelty. So from my perspective, we do not need to add anything more to accomplish this. We already have the strict rules to do so. I just believe we as a local government do not have to over legislate every part of our residents' lives. Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilmember Donovan. Councilmember Jolly.
Thank you, Madam President. It's been a while since I was a 1L in law school, but I think when we talk about our ordinances here, obviously some ordinances have penalties of jail time or fines or some, negative punishment affiliated with them. That's not the only reason why, nor is that ever the goal of enacting ordinances for a community. By enacting ordinances in a community, we lay out societal expectations of people's behaviors, and we put people on notice of how to comply with those expectations. Through my time at the court, to be honest with you, I can't list off statistics. I can't list off decisions that were made in the prosecutor's office, but I can tell you that animal cases across the board were some of the most contentious cases that came to the courthouse on a regular basis. This is one of these situations where we can take a proactive step forward and put people on notice that, yes, be mindful of the weather. Be mindful of the National Weather Service declaring a weather emergency. And if that happens, you need to take certain steps to care for your animals. That's what this is. It's nothing more, it's nothing less. It's not a gotcha. You're not going out to get anybody in jail or put them in trouble or anything like that. But it's really to set out that expectation as a community that we do care for our animals and that we need to be mindful of this sort of thing. Now, unfortunately, we have rules. We have rules, and sometimes those rules are not welcomed, but yet we all follow those rules. So I think this is a very low bar to put forth as an additional aspect of this ordinance, and I will be supporting it. And again, honestly, looking at this earlier today, I had some struggles in terms of what certain words and definitions meant and what was proposed. But where we stand now, I feel absolutely comfortable going forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Donovan, did you have something else or was your hand still up from before? All right, at this time, I'm going to pass the gavel metaphorically to Councilmember Barr. And I'm going to raise my hand. I know there's someone in the audience.
Madam President, go ahead.
And I realize we're talking about the amended language. My colleague, Mr. Jolly, said that it was a no-brainer if you couldn't support this without the, with the new amendment in it. So I guess that it qualifies a no-brainer. But going back to the points that Vice President Barr made, these are people that took it upon themselves to oversee public or private property and private dog ownership after we had had animal control officers and the Humane Society out there. This idea about common sense, that we need to legislate common sense by putting the explicit National Weather Service warnings in here. Anyone who listens to the radio or the TV or gets their weather on the internet, there are always warnings when there's severe weather about your pets and children. And I'll remind everyone, we don't, thank God, have ordinances about what you have to do with your children during severe weather storms. And I would hope that whether you're a parent to a child, or as people like to use the term, a parent to a four-legged child, an animal, that you have the common sense when the Weather Service says there's a tornado, there's hail, there's 30 degrees below zero, that you bring your animals inside. At the same time, all of those weather conditions, we have human beings that have to be outside working in those weather conditions. And they're not just first responders. There are sanitation workers. There are public service workers. And I am 100% for taking care of animals and people taking appropriate care of their animals. If you're cruel to an animal, I think you'd be cruel to a human being. But if you don't have enough sense to bring your animal in when it's 90 degrees and 90% humidity, or there's hail, or there's a tornado, or any of those other things, I don't see that us putting an ordinance on the books is going to help those people. And again, I just like to remind everyone that we don't tell people that you got to get outside. Your children can't play outside if there's 7 inches of snow. And we ask human beings to be outside in those weather conditions. And again, if you don't have the sense and the decency to take care of your animals when those conditions exist, and we add that to the books, I don't think we're going to listen to it. But again, we've just over-legislated, and we've told people that we're not stakeholders in this situation, that we're going to respond. We're going to respond to your claim about a one-off situation that, by the way, there was found to be no violation of a law and ordinance, or nothing that met the bar of cruelty to animals. And I'm done, Mr. Barr.
All right, thank you, Madam President. I do see we have 2 in the audience, but I'm going to exhaust our council comments first. So Councilmember Toy, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I don't want to make this trite by any means, but tonight you should be covering your flowers, all your beautiful things you bought for your mothers, because we have a very, very cold morning coming out. And that would go for an animal, I'm sure, too. That would be out unless, they properly have straw. As I mentioned before, we had a hunting dog as a kid. We always left it out. Now, to the point that others have made, if there was a tornado or hail and we knew that was coming, that dog would come in the house. She did not like being in the house, though, but because they're used to being outside and they got the fur and the makeup of the breed. So, that's why it's difficult to balance this one. But I don't necessarily want to tell people what to feed their animals and what not to feed them and all those good kinds of things. I would hope that most people use their heads and were raised to be responsible dog and cat owners, although we can only look to Humane Society tail waggers to see that a lot of people drop their animals off because they get tired of them. So, there are those folks out there, even in Livonia, that may have a few issues. So do we legislate for all of them as well? The bad actors? According to our city attorney, we have all those things on the book. So I will wait and try and search for my vote a little bit here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Toy. Let's go to the audience. We've got B. Hargan available. And again, B. Hargan, I believe you need to hit *6. Is that right, Madam President? *6 to
Stars. If B. Hargan is on Zoom, so let me just, I should be able to do that here.
just a minute. B. Hargan.
There we
Okay,
go.
B. Hargan, I believe you're unmuted. Go ahead. You've got
Yes.
minutes.
B. Hargan, you should be able to address the council.
All right, B. Hargan, we're not hearing you.
Everything's working on our end, so you should just be able to address the council.
All right, B. Hargan, I apologize. We're not hearing you. Let's try one more time.
There we go.
I think we're getting you. Hold on. Okay, try again, B. Hargan. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on. In recognizing the name, I'm just going to go out on a little bit of a limb here. I believe B. Hargan is actually affiliated with the home of the original Beagles. And we all received the letter previously from the son of that owner. And
Vice President Barr.
Yeah.
I passed the gavel. I should have noted that there was additional new data received for items 7 and 8. But it was received today, and it's up to council's discretion as to whether or not they want to accept it and act on it. So thank you for letting me jump back in.
Well, that's just a receive and file, right?
Yes, you can. There's no obligation to consider new data that's received the day of the meeting or less than 24 hours prior to a meeting.
Okay, let's try going to 989. I'm sorry, I won't say the whole number. Let's try going to 6518.
And that's *6.
And *6, 6518.
Should be able to hit *6.
Hello.
There we go. Go ahead.
This is Carissa Perrin from Westland, and I want to thank you guys for moving some progress forward on behalf of the pets. That really does mean a lot. I do have several concerns with what has been discussed tonight. It seems that severe weather alerts are not all encompassing. For example, there were hardly any severe weather alerts the entire month of February, and most of that month was below freezing. At what point do we wait until the dogs die and say, oops, it was too cold, we should have had a better law in place? Another thing I want to mention is that because we're talking about freezing here, we have the issue of water freezing. Water is necessary for life, of course. So if water can't be sustained, then why would the pets be required to live in a situation with no water? They're mentioned that they're perfectly fine. They are not perfectly fine. There's several situations where dogs have frozen to death. These particular beagles were shivering and holding up their paws in pain. How is that not considered cruelty and neglect? If we think about this, if a child were in the situation, that parent would be in huge trouble. They would be in jail in no time at all. So that's something I wanted food for thought here. Another thing I'd like to mention is that if we wouldn't want to remain outside when it's below freezing, why would we expect them to? I wouldn't want to be out there. Why would I expect them to? And then lastly, East Point has temperature guidelines in place. So I highly encourage that we follow their lead with this. And thank you again for your consideration.
Thank you very much for commenting. We're going to try one more time to go to B. Hargan, who is still showing as unmuted on my end. So, hold on 1 minute. Kathleen, can you try unmuting that one? Is that you that clicks that?
Yep. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I unmuted and then I hit it too quickly.
Okay. We need to unmute it again. It's still showing as muted.
Yeah, I'm requesting that Mr. and Mrs.
Fortunately, we'll be done with Zoom pretty soon, folks.
June 14th. Morgan, you should be able to unmute yourself. There we go. Oh.
Hang in there one more second, B. Hargan.
There we go.
All right, let's try it again. V. Hargan, can you try again? Okay, I feel badly that we can't hear from B. Hargan, but we tried several times. Like I said, recognizing the name, I believe that's affiliated with the home where the Beagles are. I think it's safe to say we know what their perspective on this is based on the letter that we received a couple weeks ago. And B. Hargan, thanks for attending tonight and trying to get through. I'm sorry we had those technical difficulties. So any final comments from council?
And this first vote, I know I'm not chairing, but is on the amendment to the language amendment to the ordinance, correct?
So we do, parliamentarian Kathy, we do a vote on the amendment and then we'll do a vote to accept it, right? Just like we did.
Right. So
okay.
The vote would be on eliminating E, section E.
Okay. So with that, Clerk Nash, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Donovic,
No.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
Vice President Barr,
No.
Councilmember White,
No.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
No.
All right, so the motion fails. I was laughing just because you guys probably know I was laughing. We were voting on whether to take that language out, which I didn't like, but just for clarity for people watching, I just put my ultimate vote in there. So now we would go to the vote on the original ordinance that was before us tonight, whether we would offer second reading on that and approve that. So this is voting on the ordinance that we had to review coming into this meeting that included section E, that included everything. We're doing a final vote on that ordinance.
We ready for a vote?
Yes, we're ready for a vote.
I think Councilmember McCullough.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
You might not be able to see that, Scott. Sorry.
No, I just wasn't paying attention. Go ahead, Councilman McCullough.
Thanks, Vice President Barr. Just for the record, I will be voting, obviously it's probably not going to go through. I'm going to be voting no on this, but I just wanted to clarify for the record that the amendment that I would like to see something on the books for this. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilman McCullough. Clerk Nash, please go ahead and take the roll.
Councilmember Donovic,
No.
Councilmember Jolly,
No.
Councilmember Toy,
Okay, I got to clarify this. This is to keep what we're voting on, someone?
A yes vote on this, Councilmember Toy, would be adding all of the language specifying what type of shelter it is, and adding the National Weather Service warning clause that we've been talking about. Those are the two main things.
No, thank you.
Vice President Barr,
No.
Councilmember White,
No.
Councilmember McCullough,
No.
President McIntyre.
No.
Okay, the motion fails. Sorry, a little slow in the uptake. I don't do this all the time. Motion fails. Thank you, Clerk Nash. Before I pass the gavel back to President McIntyre, I just want to tell everybody that's on this meeting, we are still on the regular agenda, and we are going to be going on to item number 9 right now. So we're nearing the end of this. If you're on here for the study agenda, there's a little bit of time yet before we start that. I apologize for the long meeting initially tonight. With that, I'll pass the gavel back to President McIntyre for item number 9.
Thank you, Vice President Barr. All right, item number 9 is a proposed amendment to the Livonia Code of Ordinances. As amended, this comes to us from the Department of Law, petition 2021-01-03 by Anderson, Eckstein, and Westrick on behalf of Botsford General Hospital. Request to determine whether or not to vacate an existing public utility easement at 39000 7 Mile Road located on the north side of 7 Mile Road between the I-275-96 Expressway and Haggerty Road in the southwest quarter of Section 6. The original constitution was 85-21. The first reading was given by Councilmember Kathy White on Monday, April 26, 2021.
Madam President, at this time, I would offer second reading.
Do we have support?
Support.
Support.
Support from Vice President Barr. Any discussion? Councilmember Toy.
I was just going to support it. Sorry, Madam Chair.
No problem. All right. Any discussion from the audience? Seeing none. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll call vote?
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
Vice President Barr,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
Aye. And the ordinance will be effective. The motion carries 7-0, and the ordinance will become effective upon publication in the newspaper. Item number 10 is an award of bid. This comes from the Department of Parks and Recreation for the Department branding project as identified in Livonia Vision 21 from budgeted funds.
So moved.
Councilmember Jolly?
I'll support that.
Okay. Any discussion? Councilmember Jolly?
I'll keep it brief. I think this is a worthy endeavor. It does seem a little bit dated. I think we all have probably multiple different Livonia Parks and Rec t-shirts in our closet, probably of all the different colors offered. But if we want to keep people engaged and keep it kind of something that's engaging, it's probably worthwhile to look at this every 20 years or so. So the time is due. Thank you.
All right, anyone from the audience? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please take the vote on item number 10, which would be an award of bid?
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
Vice President Barr,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
Aye, and the motion carries 7-0, and the bid will be awarded as requested from the Department of Parks and Recreation. Item number 11 is a waiver petition. This comes to us from the Planning Commission for petition 2021-01-02-01, submitted by Stein Investment Company, LLC, requesting approval to develop and operate a climate-controlled indoor self-storage facility on property located on the north side of Plymouth Road between Sears Drive and Merriman Road, 31100 Plymouth Road in the southwest quarter of Section 26. I would like to note that we do have new data, as respectfully suggested, the communication received from John D. Gaber, Esquire, Williams, Ratner, and Plunkett, PC, attorney for the petitioner, dated May 26, forwarding additional information. And there was also additional information sent today, which council is not obligated to consider as new data because it was not received 24 hours prior to the meeting. Councilmember Toy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to offer committee of the whole on this.
Okay.
Support.
Was that Donovan? Any discussion?
Madam President, just to
Councilmember Jolly.
Just to keep it very brief here, because this is a waiver petition and we have several of these facilities opening up in our community in the near future, it might be smart for us to have this meeting and to kind of consider the amount of such services being offered in our community, and also whether or not an additional one warrants a waiver, a waiver usage as is proposed in this case. Thank you.
All right. Vice President Barr, then Councilmember Toy.
Yeah, I just want to voice it. I like the project that's been put in front of us. And I admire I think it'd be a nice looking project, and I think it makes sense for a lot of reasons. But similar to what Councilman Jolly said, I think there's some market data that I'd like to get a little deeper look on. I don't know that this is necessarily a long discussion in committee, but I think it's worthy of further discussion before we do a full vote. Thanks.
Councilmember Toy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also, I concur with my two colleagues that just spoke. But I also want to look at, you know, I've been on Plymouth Road for 43 years with my business. And I know that the mayor and others, as we look at Vision 21, we want to adhere to some different kinds of venues of businesses, green belts, walking, things like that. So I think it behooves us to put it into committee and get some of those answers as well as to where we're going with that section of road. There's a couple of really bad buildings down there, vacant wise, that aren't being kept up, that I would hope that inspection, God bless them, would go over there and just kind of say to those owners, come on, let's spruce it up a little bit down here. We don't need that kind of, it's almost blighted down there. You know, and that's what I mean. You want to look at that whole thing, and that would be helpful, Madam Chair, so much if we could get this into committee of the whole. Appreciate it.
All right, any other discussion? Any discussion from anyone in the audience? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please take the vote on the resolution offered by Councilmember Toy, approved by Councilmember Donovic, that would refer this to committee of the whole, which was actually Resolution C for anyone keeping track on our coming out study.
I see Councilmember
Madam
White.
Chair, did you want to go to the audience before we?
Oh, I thought I did. Somebody did raise a hand in the audience. I thought I had said it, maybe no one heard me. Thank you very much. All right, we've got John, I'll go to Mr. Gaber, John Gaber, and if you would, you should be able to unmute, and if you would give us your name and address, please. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Madam President, City Council, John Gaber, 380 North Old Woodward, Birmingham, Michigan. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of you. As you know, we've submitted additional materials. We heard what you said at the last meeting. Essentially, you were concerned about this Plymouth Road corridor, the ability to utilize this building for either this space or for other productive adaptive reuse purposes. And then also the concerns about the market demand for this type of facility within Livonia. We submitted the letter May 6th that you referenced, and we thought we addressed these concerns pretty effectively in terms of the market analysis, which we supplemented with another sheet today where we can explain this in detail if necessary. But the need is certainly there. The building, we've shown that the building's been marketed, and due to its functional obsolescence with the split level, there's just no demand for that building as it currently sits. And we thought that we had a creative adaptive reuse plan for that building. So given that and the fact that there are high vacancy rates for office uses, it makes it very difficult to reuse this building for anything productive. So we understand and appreciate the city's desire to look at this corridor, maybe in a whole, but as it pertains to this building and this property, we certainly believe that using it for an adaptive reuse that, as Vice President Barr mentioned, is going to be an aesthetically pleasing use of this facility and is going to preserve kind of a landmark building. Madam President, as you say at the last meeting, is the best use for this facility since it's been, unleased except for a small use for the last 5 or 6 years that it's been available. So there is we really believe, and the owner believes, that there is no better adaptive reuse for this facility. So we would certainly request indulgence for approval, but we certainly understand your concerns as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gaber. All right, I will go to I'm having a hard time this evening with your name, Mr. Ruggerillo. You should be able to unmute yourself, and let's see. Sorry. Okay, there we go.
Okay, thank you very much. Madam President and distinguished council members. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity.
And would you give us your name and address?
My name is Jerome Ruggiero. I represent.
Ruggiero, thank you, Mr. Ruggiero. I knew I wasn't getting it right.
That's okay. I represent Livonia Budget Storage, 29150 7 Mile Road in Livonia. And I'm here this evening to express serious concern regarding the proposed Plymouth Road storage facility request by the Atlanta-based developer Stein Investment. I know that I did send some correspondence to the city council, and it was not prior to the 24-hour period. So taking that into consideration, I would just like to take a moment to express the concerns that contained there. As you know, there are 2 recently approved similar storage developments currently under construction in the same market area. Clover Storage will yield over 100,000 square feet, and Livonia Budget Storage, which I represent, will yield over 70,000 square feet, both coming online this year with proposed future expansions should the demand present itself. These projects represent a very healthy and substantial addition to the self-storage market in and around the city of Livonia, which is home to some 16 storage facilities within the city itself and several more just outside the city limits. Several of them are within a mile of this proposed Plymouth Road site. Suffice it to say that I believe, and my group believes, that the market has reached the saturation point. The approval of yet another very large facility of this type in such close proximity with the 2 largest approved facilities not yet open, simply put, is not a healthy environment for any of them. To allow such a large additional development jeopardizes the economic viability of all 3 projects and the others that have existed for many years in the city. And I think that is in spirit what the city is trying to avoid in the first place. I can't speak for Clover, but I can tell you that my partners and I would have very possibly.
Madam Chair, the 2 minutes is up.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ruggiero. We appreciate your comments. And if no one else from the audience has any additional comments, we will go to the vote on the resolution that's been offered to put this into committee. All right, Madam Clerk, would you please take the vote to put this item, which is item number 11, into committee of the whole, please?
Councilmember Donovic?
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly?
Aye.
Councilmember Toy?
Aye.
Vice President Barr?
Aye.
Councilmember White?
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough?
Aye.
President McIntyre?
Aye, and the resolution carries, and we will be referring this item to committee of the whole, and we will look to get a committee of the whole meeting scheduled when possible. And we have no new business before we go back to audience communication. I am going to, for once and for all, get Doug Moore's title right. Mr. Moore, who is a frequent visitor and participant in our meetings, is the Assistant Director of Public Works. So I wanted to make sure I got that right. And at this time, we go back for our last session of audience communication. Of anyone who did not communicate with the council during the first audience communication at the beginning of the meeting would like to communicate with the council on any item not on this evening's agenda, this is an opportunity to do so. All right. Once, twice, final call.
Motion to adjourn.
With that motion to adjourn, support from, sorry, you're like ventriloquist. And I believe we can safely show 7 on that. We are adjourned at 9:25. The study session will begin at 9:35. Thank you.